بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, today I'm going to be explaining the ovarian and endometrial cycle. However, through explaining these cycles, I'm going to be touching upon few very important concepts that I think they're crucial to understand to further understand these cycles. Bismillah nabda. Now, before starting with the ovarian cycle, I think it's very important to understand oogenesis. Oogenesis is basically the process of the development of the female gamete. We obviously know that we have a female gamete and then we have a male gamete, which is the sperm. They both fertilize in the fallopian tube to give us and then migrate to the uterus and then the implanting to form and give us the fetus or the baby. Now, oogenesis is basically the development of the germ cell to the secondary oocyte. And then after the secondary oocyte forms, if fertilization happens, we can form an ovum or a zygote. Now, as you can see here, oogenesis starts way before birth. Um, as you can see here, we're starting with a primordial germ cell. And the primordial germ cell starts cell division. As doing cell division, it goes and migrates to the ovarian cortex, where it changes to the primordial ovum. And as you can see here, at birth, when the baby is born, the baby will have around 1 to 2 million oocytes. These oocytes, we call them the primary oocyte. And as you can see here, meiosis 1 is not fully completed. Why is that? Meiosis 1 is going to be completed when the girl hits puberty. However, the baby is born with 1 to 2 million primary oocytes that are arrested at prophase 1 of meiosis 1. So meiosis 1 before puberty isn't going to be fully completed. Then each month, as from puberty till menopause, um, meiosis 1 is one of the primary oocyte is going to complete meiosis 1 to give us two important things: the first polar body and the secondary oocyte. The first polar body usually degenerates, and the secondary oocyte is going to arrest at metaphase 2. Now, depending on fertilization happening or not, we can see that the fertilization happens here. Like, for example, if fertilization happens, meiosis 2 is going to be completed. However, if fertilization doesn't happen, the secondary oocyte won't proceed to finish meiosis 2. So sperm comes, fertilizes the secondary oocyte. Meiosis 2 is going to be completed, giving us an ovum and the ovum or zygote, and giving us a second polar body, which also degenerates. Okay, so as you can see here, we can see some kind of follicles. We can see how the development of follicles usually with the which I'm going to be explaining in the ovarian cycle in way more details. As you can see here, the follicle is maturing throughout the oogenesis process. And the follicle is basically a group of cells. We can say the granulosa and theca cells, and they're very important and crucial for the nutrition for the oocyte and helping the oocyte to develop and reach the final final number of cells. Now, as you can see here, this is a very important slide. Before now, I'm going to be starting explaining both, but however, this is a very important slide that I'm going to be referring back while I'm explaining the cycles, the ovarian and the endometrial cycle. Now, what do I mean by ovarian cycle? Ovarian cycle is usually we're looking at the how is ovulation happening, how is the development uh, of the ovum is happening, what's happening in what's making the ovum maintain in the, for example, in the uterus, what makes the what are the hormones that are important. This is the ovarian cycle. Now, as you can see here, this is a very simple summary or the diagram explaining what's happening exactly in the ovarian cycle. As the ovarian cycle is happening, we have something we call the endometrial cycle, and we can tell that endometrial cycle is something that's happening in the endometrium layer of the uterus. Now, we can separate the ovarian cycle into a follicular phase and the luteal phase. As you can see here, this is the follicular phase, the luteal phase. The follicular phase basically starts as the corpus luteum degenerates till the ovulation. And then from ovulation till the degeneration of the corpus luteum, we can call it the luteal phase. Same thing goes to the endometrial cycle. Before ovulation, it's called proliferative phase, and after ovulation, it's called the secretory phase. And as you can see here, in every phase, we have a very important hormone that's controlling what exactly is happening around. Like for example, the proliferative phase is mainly controlled by estrogen in the endometrium. Progesterone is usually controlling the secretory phase of the endometrium. And here, for example, LH surge in the LH is causing ovulation. So it's very important to know what's the main hormone that is acting upon in each phase. Now we can start with the ovarian cycle. Now, actually, looking at the ovarian cycle at the first sight, it looks scary. However, it's very simple as I go through each and every step. Now, as I said, the ovarian cycle, we can see here the premoidal follicle, which I said the baby is born with 1 to 2 million premoidal follicle, and then as the girl hits puberty, meiosis 1 is going to be completed. However, at this premoidal phase, it's before puberty. We can see that the primary follicle is arrested at prophase 1, which I also mentioned earlier. And this is the ovum, and as you can see, the oocyte, the primary oocyte. However, as you can see here, it's surrounded by a group of cells, and we call these the granulosa cells. They're very important to nourish the primary oocyte, and moreover, the granulosa cells, they release inhibitory factors that inhibit the development of the primary oocyte and make the primary oocyte arrested at prophase 1. So it's very important to remember the point at which the primary oocyte is arrested at. Now, the girl hits puberty, activation of the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis. So this is the axis that's important for the hormonal secretion of the FSH and LH. Puberty happens, and then as you can see here, there is a rise in the FSH and the LH. Now, mainly, now we're going to be talking about the follicular phase. Now, we need to remember in the follicular phase, the two hormones that are very important and crucial. FSH is for the FSH and estrogen. They're very important for the folliculogenesis. Folliculogenesis is basically the development of the follicle. Now, as you can see here, FSH and LH both increase. However, mainly we are looking at FSH. Now, the FSH and LH cause the growth of 6 to 12 primary oocytes. However, we don't want all these oocytes to proceed to for ovulation. However, because if they all proceed and they all ovulate, we're going to be having so many secondary oocytes. And usually this happens, for example, when there's twins, two primary oocytes proceed and then two ovulation happens. Now, the 6 to 12 primary follicles, one of them at the end is going to proceed and ovulate. Now, as you can see here, FSH main things that it performs is the enlargement of the ovum. As you can see here, enlargement of the ovum, simple, and then rapid proliferation of the granulosa cells. And as I said, granulosa cells, they are very important for the nourishment of the primary oocyte to help it proceed. Now we are having new cells in the around the ovum or around the oocyte, which is theca cells. These theca cells, as you can see here, they differentiate as they move forward. They differentiate into two different cells, the theca interna and theca externa, and each one has an important function. For example, the interna is the production of estrogen and progesterone, but mainly estrogen. The externa is important for the development of highly vascular connective tissue that they become the capsule of the follicle. So as we move forward, as you can see here, we developed theca cells have appeared, granulosa cells for the nourishment, and then as you can see here, the oocyte is starting to, there is enlargement in the ovum. Now, as you can see here, there is a space that have been created. This space has been created by the granulosa cells, and we call this space the antrum. And this antrum usually has a high concentration of estrogen. If you remember, I said FSH and estrogen, they are the main hormones that acting uh, in the follicular genesis or the follicular phase and the proliferative phase of the endometrium. Now, under the effect of estrogen, what happens is the ovum starts to develop more and more, and the antrum starts to become bigger. Now, at this phase, we can see there is a decrease in the FSH. Why is that decrease in FSH? To prevent the growth of the less developed follicle. So, as I said, one primary ovum is going to proceed and it's going to ovulate. This decrease in the FSH causes this inhibition of the less developed follicle. But you might ask a very important question: why is the developing or the chosen follicle not affected by this decrease in the FSH? Now, as you can see here, the granulosa cells have developed this antrum space that I mentioned that has a high concentration of estrogen, and this antrum and the LSH are going to be having an intrinsic positive feedback that is going to help the uh, ovum to proceed and not die off while there is a decrease in the FSH. Now, moving on, we are having a mature follicle. As you can see here, the secondary oocyte have developed, meaning it completed meiosis 1 and it is in the metaphase, complete meiosis 1 and it is metaphase 2. Now, as you can see here, at this point, when ovulation is now going to happen, as you can see here, the antrum has been getting so large, and the obviously estrogen is very high at this point. Now the secondary oocyte have developed. Now it's ovulation time. For ovulation to happen, there is an increase in the LH. So it's very important to remember that LH is the main hormone that's acting in the ovulation phase. There is an LH surge, and there is the FSH is going to increase also slightly. Progesterone is going to increase, however, estrogen is going to decrease. Now, before ovulation, what has led to this LH increasing? Now, we need to know that progesterone and estrogen, they have an inhibitory effect on LH and FSH. However, while ovulation, like before ovulation, for LH to increase, estrogen actually causes a positive feedback on LH. So estrogen increasing before ovulation, as you can see here, we can see here estrogen is increasing because we said the antrum has been uh, created, and as you can see here, FSH is the main hormone in the follicular phase, and as you can see here, estrogen is increasing it's very high at the follicular phase. Now estrogen usually, as you can see here, this is progesterone and this is estrogen. Usually normally they are inhibitory effect on FSH and LH. However, in this case, estrogen is doing a positive feedback on LH, causing a surge or an increase in the LH. Now ovulation has happened. As you can see here, ovulation have happened, and this is the secondary oocyte, and depending on whether it's going to fertilize or not is going to affect the corpus luteum. Now we're left with the corpus luteum. Secondary oocyte has left. As you can see here, there's cells or the corona radiata that protects the secondary oocyte. Now, what happens to this follicle? It changes to something we call a corpus luteum. The corpus luteum, why is it called that way? Basically, in a process that's called luteinization, the granulosa and the theca cells that I already mentioned before, they become filled with lipid and turn to lutein cells. And these lutein cells, they're important because they secrete estrogen and progesterone. And as I said earlier, estrogen and progesterone, they are inhibitory for FSH and LH. Okay, so what happens here, as you can see here, progesterone estrogen is increasing, progesterone is increasing. All of these increase is because done by the corpus luteum, and because of they have an inhibitory effect on FSH and LH, they are decreasing the level of FSH and LH. Now, this is the only exception, which I already mentioned. Estrogen does a positive feedback on LH only in ovulation. Now we're starting luteal phase, obviously. We call it luteinization. Granulosa theca change to luteal cells, and they produce progesterone and estrogen. And also, they produce the theca. They produce inhibin, which I'm going to mention at the end of the lecture. It also inhibits the FSH, inhibits FSH. Now, because we're losing the hormones, like depending on fertilization happening or not, it's going to change the course of the corpus luteum. Okay, now we have two cases that we need to consider for the corpus luteum. One is that fertilization occurs, and secondly is fertilization doesn't occur. Now, if fertilization doesn't occur, the progesterone and the corpus luteum is going to degenerate, and the estrogen and progesterone, they're going to decrease. And as I said, because they're going to decrease, what's going to happen? LH and FSH are going to increase, and we're going to start the cycle again. However, if fertilization occurred, the corpus luteum is not going to degenerate, because the fetus needs the estrogen and progesterone to further enhance the endometrium. So what happens is, in pregnancy, we have human chorionic gonadotropin that's going to take over, and it's going to stimulate the corpus luteum. It's going to tell the corpus luteum there is implantation, fertilization has happened. The corpus luteum is going to understand this, and it's going to keep secreting estrogen and progesterone till about 2 to 4 months, until the placenta takes over the function, and it's going to decrease as secrete its own estrogen and progesterone without the need of the corpus luteum. Now, just a summary as what we already mentioned: follicular phase, luteal phase. We can see here an increase in the estrogen and progesterone, LH surge in ovulation, estrogen and FSH, main hormones acting in the follicular phase. Also, I'm going to mention that estrogen is important in the proliferative phase of the endometrium, and progesterone and the estrogen, they're important in the that are released from the corpus luteum. They are important for the secretory phase of the endometrium. Now moving on to the endometrial cycle, actually three important events that happen in the endometrial cycle. We have the proliferative phase, which I've already mentioned. It happens because of the estrogen. And what happens in this phase, we can see the endometrial lining, there's thickening and proliferation of the endometrial cells. And why is that? It's very important, and increasing the blood supply is very important, that if fertilization happened, it's very important to accommodate the fetus, which is going to actually eat through the endometrial wall. Now, after that phase, we ovulation have happened, and then we have reached to the secretory phase. Proliferative phase happens before ovulation, secretory happens after ovulation. Secretion of some substance that help nourish the fetus if there was implantation that would occur. So, for example, before implantation of the fetus, some secretions like the uterine milk, it's going to secrete to the fetus, and it's going to nourish the or give nutrient to the fetus. And obviously, there's going to be, as you can see, there is some kind of proliferation that's happening, because estrogen is usually also still present at this phase. So some kind of proliferation that happens, however, is not like the proliferation of the proliferative phase. Now, if fertilization hasn't occurred, menstruation is going to happen, which usually is because the shedding of the cells, and then the cycle is going to start again, and then the vasospasm of the blood vessels that have been created to accommodate the fetus. Now there's no fertilization. We need to go back to the point number one, and then the cycle is going to repeat again. Now lastly, I'm going to be talking about the theca and the granulosa cells in a more depth and like detailed way. Now, as you can see here, we have LH and FSH. The theca cells have only one receptor, which is for LH. However, for the granulosa cells, we're having two receptors for the LH and the FSH. So FSH acts on the granulosa cells only. However, LH acts on both the granulosa, the theca, and the granulosa. Okay, so what happens is basically theca cells releases androgen, and then by the enzyme, granulosa cells have an enzyme, we call it called the aromatase enzyme. This aromatase enzyme is important to convert the androgen to estrogen. And obviously this process is facilitated by the FSH, meaning that FSH only acting on the granulosa cells, so it will enhance the effect of the enzyme aromatase, changing androgen to estrogen. And as you can see here, progesterone is being secreted by both cells, the theca and the granulosa cells. And after progesterone, estrogen are secreted, they both go to the target tissue. Now, granulosa cells also secrete two important hormones, which is activin and inhibin, and they mainly act on FSH, as you can see here. Activin basically does a positive feedback, and the inhibin has a negative feedback. You can tell from the name on FSH. And just to mention another point, I need to repeat it as it's an important point. Estrogen usually has an inhibitory effect, as you can see here, inhibitory effect on the secretion of FSH and LH. However, in ovulation, this is an exception. In ovulation, estrogen is increasing LH, causing the surge or the peak in the LH in ovulation. And this is all for the ovarian and the endometrial cycle. I hope you understood everything, and if you have any question, you can send me through WhatsApp, or you can drop a comment below the video. Thank you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.